Well, first of all, you couldn't be more right by saying keep it simple. And the other part of it is organic growth. And I talked about the danger of top down. And that was always a drag in the old tech world when you were told you can't do this and you have to do that. AI, it's even harder because if AI becomes an obstacle to you doing your job because your management have imposed some complicated solution, you're missing the whole point of AI, which is to make your job easier and to make you more effective and powerful. That before you can make yourself more powerful, you really need to be able to disaggregate the different parts of your daily life. And say the pain points for me writing performance reviews for that guy or writing these emails that are similar but need to be custom made in some way to candidates that I'm trying to recruit. So, where are those pain points? Is one dimension. And the second is where are the risks involved? And so the stuff that deals with highly sensitive personal data, we put into a separate box. The stuff that is, well, if my Twitter post is only 80% effective and I don't do it that well, it's not the end of the world. So it is in the low risk category. And so trying, I think, to start by this matrix of where is the low risk, high pain stuff. And let's start there.
Hi, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And this morning, I have with me Justin Simpson, who I've had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with recently. Justin, will be the one of the panel experts at Transform 2025. And so I'm super excited to speak with Justin. He is the co-founder and publisher of a company called Here.Now.AI. I will let you kind of give us a little bit about your background and about the topic for your Transform panel.
Thank you, Denise, and thanks for having me on to talk about this. I'm very excited actually because I think the subject matter is highly topical and I hope highly relevant to the audience that we'll be covering. Um, so just a second on Here Now AI. I worked over my career in the sort of technologies that underlie what is now AI. So when the chat GPT explosion occurred, I felt naturally that I had a role to play in helping people to understand it and how to use it, not from a technical perspective. In fact, that entire audience of the world that is not technical that still has the opportunity to benefit from or be affected by AI. So I founded this company and we do two things. The one is publish a weekly newsletter, which is intended to give people bite-sized chunks of things they can do to experience AI. And that could be at work, it could be at home, it could be sometimes fun, because I think to get your head around the technology, you sometimes need to play with the creative side of AI as well. And the other part is talking to companies, mostly small and medium sized companies, about how AI can really transform their businesses, what it means to be using AI, how to experiment with it, how to implement it, what the sort of guardrails should be, etc. So again, focusing on non-technical applications, but leveraging this amazing technology that's now with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And then go ahead and tell us a little bit more then too about that panel.
Yeah, well, the panel relates directly to that. Now, you you can see that I have gray hair, and that puts me in a category of people for whom this is not natural. We mostly think about AI. We think about these young 20-something engineers that work day and night, that are brilliant and that are deeply technical, and that's sort of the space in which AI occupies. But I dispute that. I think AI is for everybody, and particularly folk who have wisdom and experience that they can bring to really leveraging AI. If you think about the combination of a career's worth of know-how and knowledge, and then having effectively a full-time PhD trained assistant sitting there asking you like a puppy dog, what can I do? What can I do? I think is a terrific combination. So the panel is about leveraging AI, I would say for mid-career and beyond professionals, thinking about this technology, what it could do to help them, and what it might do to the industry as a whole, and how they might benefit from that. And so we'll have a couple of folk talking about the various aspects of that, and I'll be contributing.
That's amazing. So what are some of the topics that you'll be covering to, I want to say, attract an audience there, especially the right audience?
Yeah. My audience, as I said, if there's somebody deep into AI already, if their companies established these extreme technological uses of AI, they probably don't want to hear what we have to say because they know already, and hopefully they believe. But really, for folk who are thinking about this and saying, "Wow, I can see this wave coming. Maybe I'm playing with ChatGPT at home or occasionally at work. I'm not really sure about how to think about it." I would love them to come and listen to some thoughts about how we might help them approach specifically at work, but I also encourage these technologies to be thought of as leveraging your home life or things outside of work as well.
So what are some of the key things if I'm sitting there as an audience and I have been afraid to jump into AI and I just haven't crossed that bridge yet because it's like too scary, too daunting. People are talking about it all around me and they're saying it's everywhere. And I'm maybe kind of mid to end career. People are telling me that I have to embrace it, otherwise I'm going to lose my job. I mean, so get me over my fears.
And so I think there's two parts of that, if I can, to get you over your fears. But just a data point, which I think, or two data points, which I think are really interesting, but also frustrating. That AI adoption is happening on an age skewed basis. In other words, younger people are finding it much easier to adopt AI than older folk. And even more frustrating to me, as someone who spent my career trying to advance women and make sure that we built workforces that were welcoming and embracing, that the male to female adoption ratio is very heavily skewed. So if I take a mid to late career female, she's likely to be statistically on the low end, as you said, whether it's from fear or for lack of exposure to technology. And that's completely unnecessary. This technology is entirely accessible, usable. The whole idea is something called natural language processing is exactly what it sounds like. You talk to it as if it were a human. You ask it questions, you challenge it, etc. And so part one is getting comfortable with the technology. And a lot of people said, well, I experimented with ChatGPT or one of those competitive, and it wasn't very good. It didn't give me a good answer. And my response to that is twofold. The one is probably if you did it a long while ago, it was unsatisfactory in some ways. And try it today because what's happened to those models in that very short space of time is incredible. You can now, without paying, have an AI model run a deep research into your industry or your sector and come back with a report that is highly professional. You can have it engage with you like a therapist. It has that sort of knowledge. You can have it engage with you like a human resources advisor, ask it specific and detailed questions about any aspect of your job and have it come back with answers. So before you get to that detailed level, I encourage people to say, look, just go play with it. Don't treat it like Google. It's not a Google where you ask one question and you get a simplistic answer. It's more like, as I say, a PhD level intern. If you don't tell it what you want out of it, you're going to get an answer that might not be satisfactory. If you engage and say, look, I want you to write me a report. I want the report to look like this. I want it to have this tone. Try and write it like it's an Axios article or a New York Times editorial or, yeah, and spend some time challenging it. Do that in a humorous way. Or if you want to be obscure, present it to me in rhyme or as if it were a rock and roll lyric. I just get the sense that it's a conversation and hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised by the quality of the output. And if you're not, I would challenge you to say, think about what you're doing in terms of asking it the questions, because there are an awful lot of people who are very impressed by it. And if you happen to be the one human who says, this is terribly unimpressive, it might just be that you're not challenging it or prompting it in the right way. So that's step one, which is just get this basic familiarity. And I encourage people to play with that at all. In addition to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, and there's differences between those models that we can maybe cover later. But that's the basic chatbot interaction. There are tools like, SUNO, where you can write a song. You say in plain language, write me I don't know, a sea shanty that talks about Transform 2025 and all the people I'm going to meet. Or write me a country and western song that describes my fears about AI and how I'm going to overcome that. But you pick your poison, and the better you prompt, the more remarkable the output. But even a basic prompt, as I've described, will come up with a song in seconds that's actually quite realistic and plausible. Or go into one of these art generators. They fit within the Meta AI or the Google AI, or most of them have some sort of art generation. So draw me a picture of something. extreme. I lack artistic talent, and so I can barely draw a stick figure in real life, but I can come up with quite a credible, draw me a picture of a female detective in a noir scene in a 20s urban environment with rain falling in among the lamplight. I don't know. You have to pick your own thing, and you'll be astonished. So that, I think those exercises are fun. So they're worthwhile in and of themselves, but they also have the benefit of helping users become familiar with the power and the flexibility and the inherent capabilities of AI. So I think those sorts of experimentations are as important as immediately jumping into the work side and saying, what can I do at work?
Yeah, I love that. Now, you brought up the different AI, what are we calling them? Platforms? Are we calling them
Models,
models?
chatbots, it doesn't
Chatbots?
doesn't matter. Yeah.
So I've used Gemini and I've used ChatGPT. I started out loving Gemini, but then Gemini and I had ran into a bit of a problem. So Gemini tells me one day I'm asking it a question or asking it to help me with a problem I'm working on, and it came back and it said null. And I said, "What do you mean null?" And it said, "I'm still learning." So I don't remember what my question was, but I think there might have been a glitch because it wasn't anything like that I shouldn't have been able to answer. So I thought, okay, obviously we're running into a bit of a problem. So I'm going to try Chat GPT. So now I'm using Chat GPT and it's a little more advanced in my opinion. And it does, and there are some differences that I'm seeing between Chat GPT and Gemini. I haven't tried Claude yet or Perplexity. If I'm using though AI for the first time and all four of these different, what did you call them? Not platforms,
Models or
models.
chatbots.
So if you
Yeah.
if we try all four of these different models for a first time user, what would you recommend?
I'd have to say ChatGPT just because 70% plus usage is ChatGPT. So that is the sort of, in the same way that we talk about Kleenex as a thing as opposed to a product, ChatGPT is sort of becoming a little bit that standard. But I think again, part of the experimentation is asking the same question of the different bots and seeing if you like the different answers. And so if you really are disciplined about it, there's an app or a website called Choosy Chat. And Choosy Chat allows you side by side to put in your prompt and look at the answers. The and then make up, well, there's one called Chatbot Arena, where you put in the prompt and it gives you the answers and you rank them, and then it goes away and says, okay, out of the 10,000 people who played this game today, they think that ChatGPT is currently the best, or Claude, or whatever it is. But you don't have to be that structured. I do think though. So if you're going to pick one, it doesn't matter really, but let's say ChatGPT because it's the most common. The thing is, the models are changing and they're changing so quickly that it's impossible, even for experts, to stay on top of exactly which is best at what on a given time. So there might be a model that's very good at helping you with coding. There might be a model that's helping you with mathematics or science. There's a model that's best with this or that. If I were to make a generalization, I'd say the following. ChatGPT is very popular and it has released a couple of very, very good models. So that's a good one to just start with. People in the creative industry or for human resources, folk who want to use it to create communications. Currently, Claude is seen as the one that has the most human sounding voice. Now, of course, you need to tell it how to make it sound like you. You can upload previous things that you've written, emails or blog posts or whatever it is, and say, make it sound like this. And it probably does the best job at doing that. ChatGPT just released a very expensive for $200 a month to get this deep research feature, which I was describing, which goes in and really gives you a thoughtful, analytic review of whatever topic you want. But Perplexity just released a model that's free that does a slightly less deep but still comprehensive search on the same thing, and that's called Deep Search on Perplexity. So I think the way to think about Perplexity is more like a Google on steroids. Perplexity would like to replace Google because you ask a question and it will go to the web now and give you current answers. And if you ask the deep research model, or you click on that button, it will give you a really thorough, and it's fascinating. It stops and thinks. It says, that was a good question, Justin. Let me say, in order to give you an answer, I'm going to need to think about the following facts. And then slowly iterates through those facts and presents it in a coherent way. Google is a good all-rounder. Meta is built into, if you have WhatsApp and you're a WhatsApp user, it's just like having another WhatsApp friend, except you can ask questions. And then, as I say, X, formerly Twitter, we still call it Twitter, released a model called Grok. This is Elon Musk's latest model. And what he's done there, similar to what he's done with Twitter, is say accuracy is all important, political correctness is not. And so it's a very less restricted model, and it can therefore come up with solutions or answers that might be more offensive to some, in the same way that Twitter might be might be a more controversial platform than it, or X might be a more controversial platform than it used to be. But if that's of interest to users, that's also recently available for free.
How would we use, or how would you compare, though, some of the other models like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini to another model like X or Twitter or Meta? I mean,
I think you talked about the big four, and I think that's the right place to basically stay, unless you have a deep interest in getting into the obscure differences between them. I think,
oh,
so.
okay,
So
okay.
if you play with Gemini by Google, if you play with ChatGPT, if you play with Claude by Anthropic, if you play with Perplexity, you're probably covering the vast majority of the AI landscape that's necessary for either work or home play. And going beyond that is not really necessary. It's just a matter of interest if that sparks something.
Interesting. I think though that, like I said, using the four, they're easier. I mean, you pull them up on your computer, ask it a question. The format to me is what's so easy. It's like going into Google in some ways because there's just a little box there to say, "How can I help you?" You just type in whatever. And you can either sign up or not sign up. I know some people still have a lot of trepidation around signing up for something that they're not familiar with, and they hear a lot of scary stories about AI and how it's going to steal all your personal information, blah blah blah. But I think that, of course, we could talk about TikTok from that perspective. I mean, how many people are on TikTok? And in fact, how many people are on TikTok that haven't used AI themselves, one of these other models?
So TikTok was deemed so dangerous because of the data that it was sending back to servers in China that both houses of Congress agreed on banning it, which is extraordinary for both houses of Congress to agree on anything. And then fairly shortly, a little while ago, a model called DeepSeek was released. And for a while, it was the number one downloaded app on the App Store. Well, DeepSeek is sending data back to servers in China just like TikTok. And so I have a caution. I'm not comfortable recommending that to people. The model itself is now available in ways that don't send back to China. For example, on Perplexity, you can access the thinking powers of the model if you're interested in exploring it, but the app itself is dangerous. So I think you have to think about privacy in a personal sense, but also as we sort of transition to talking about the HR field and what applications might make sense for non-technical users to think about, you have to give due consideration to confidentiality of data, because HR is one of those areas where uploading stuff has to be done quite thoughtfully, shall we say. Obviously, with the sensitivity, the legal sensitivities and the practical sensitivities of some of the information.
What if I told you there's one event that brings together the brightest minds in people leadership, workforce technology, and the future of work? We are proud to partner up with Transform 2025, the premier event where technology meets the diverse community shaping the workplace of tomorrow. March 17th through the 19th at Wynn Las Vegas. Join over 350 dynamic speakers, interactive small group discussions, and cutting-edge tech innovations, all designed to help you lead workplace transformation with confidence. But it's not just about learning, it's about connection. Build your network, exchange ideas, and challenge the status quo alongside progressive people leaders, workforce tech investors, and future of work entrepreneurs. Exclusive for Talking TA listeners. Get a special discounted rate when you register now. Visit talkingta.com to secure your spot today. Transform 2025, where the future of work happens. See ya in Vegas. On the HR side, because now I've got some other questions around this. For HR and talent acquisition, do you have any data that tells us about people who are from mid to late career who have not attempted to learn AI yet?
There's no specific data that I can find, and I'll keep looking. And hopefully, by the time the conference comes around, if there's anything out there, I would have would have dug it up. But there's nothing specific to HR at the moment. There's just general adoption. So I think my starting proposition is probably the same. Now, because AI and HR are such natural bedfellows, and we can talk more about that, there are a number of applications that are entering the space trying to transform or empower HR professionals with AI applications. And so I expect that there are companies that are imposing those, for example, in the HR side from a top-down perspective, much like they used to do when I was there, that everybody now has to have this version of Windows or this version of Excel or PowerPoint. Um, and I generally, so there may be folk who are in that camp, and I generally don't love that, because part of the power and the joy of AI is that it's a bottom-up sort of thing. Each individual can find where it helps them and leverages them versus where it doesn't. Um, the other thing is, of course, a product-based approach, and there are probably folk who will be listening to this who are disagree with me because they represent a particular product. A product-based approach is not the right way to approach AI in HR. I think that there are many products that will be fantastic solutions, but one should step back and say, okay, what are the processes within HR or within talent acquisition? And some of those are the same, and some are actually quite different, as you will know better than me. What are the processes that lend themselves to AI? What things might I want the AI to do that are going to help me be better at my job? And start with the process and the identified area, and then look for the product match, as opposed to saying, I'm sure there'll be fantastic array of vendors at the conference who have AI products looking for a home. So as I say, it's not to say that they're wrong. It's just that I think that the going about it the other way of identifying the problem first and then finding the solution, as opposed to saying, gosh, this looks like a all singing, all dancing application.
Okay, so I'm so grateful that you're bringing this up. One of the things that I have heard a number of times now, probably for the last year, is to keep it simple when starting to use AI. There's like all these different new AI backed tools coming out, and people are going, oh my God. And when you do go to these conferences, you're overwhelmed by the amount of vendors there that are selling products that tend to overlap, a lot of them, with each other one way or another. And so, one of the things that's been coming up at these conferences when I interview people, and even when I interview people for the podcast, keep it simple. Don't go for the bling. See what works for your company, see what works for your team, your organization, that's simpler. Start out with one of the basic models. You don't need to go out and purchase anything yet until you determine what you need. Now, going with that, how do we determine what we need? So let's say that we're training our team, we're getting them up and running. They're using Chat GPT for creating job descriptions, for writing some great emails, for doing some marketing, employer branding, whatever they're using it for. And now they're like, okay, this is great, but there's something missing. So let's talk about that in a little detail.
Yeah, well, first of all, you couldn't be more right by saying keep it simple. And the other part of it, what you're describing, I think is very important, is organic growth. And I talked about the danger of top down. And that was always a drag in the old tech world when you were told you can't do this and you have to do that. But we sort of got used to it. With AI, it's even harder, because if AI becomes an obstacle to you doing your job because your management have imposed some complicated solution, you're missing the whole point of AI, which is to make your job easier and to make you more effective and powerful. So I very much am opposed to this sort of, oh gosh, we've gone and spent millions of dollars buying some magical fixed little solution, and now you have to learn how to use it. And very much in support of what you described, which is the sort of MBA in me coming out, that before you can make yourself more powerful, you really need to be able to disaggregate the different parts of your daily life and say the pain points for me, writing performance reviews for that guy, or writing these emails that are similar but need to be custom made in some way to candidates that I'm trying to recruit, or my social media communications every day. I'm told I have to be on LinkedIn and Twitter and in order to maintain my profile, and boy, it's a drag. So where are those pain points is one dimension. And the second is, where are the risks involved? And so the stuff that deals with highly sensitive personal data, we put into a separate box. The stuff that is, well, if my Twitter post is only 80% effective and I don't do it that well, it's not the end of the world. What is in the low risk category. And so trying, I think, to start by this matrix of where is the low risk, high pain stuff. And let's start there. And that could be exactly what you described using for drafting emails, etc. When they say, wow, wouldn't it be nice if I could come in the morning and have somebody summarize my email inbox into stuff that relates to talent acquisition, stuff that relates to process, invoicing, business, and other. And I'll deal with the other myself, but the other two categories I want to be summarized in some way or organized in some way. And that's a use. So finding the uses that you can sort of build and test without some big expensive system, and in doing it, like playing with it, and then talking to your fellow employees. So I love the idea of AI champions within an organization, and that's been the case in other technologies or other adaptation. But there's somebody there who's done it before. They're the best person to listen to because they're in your organization or in a parallel organization. They know what it's about and they're excited. You can see that they're getting a bang out of it. There's probably something worth looking at there as opposed to, again, an external product or something that hasn't been deemed to fit this particular problem. And then as employees get together and talk about this stuff and people throw up things, then you can decide, okay, this would be great to have on an institutional basis. So, for example, there's a fantastic technology part of this where you can upload a bunch of documents, PDFs, Word documents, whatever it is, and interrogate those documents or have those documents explained back to you or be able to, even in the case of a fantastic Google product called Notebook LM, have those products, that content turned into a podcast. Very engaging podcast. Two people talking to each other about the material that you put up there. And then you put up your hand or you push a button actually, and they say, yes, we've got a question from somebody in our audience. And then you ask the question and they answer it. And so whatever your learning mechanism is, it's allowing you to learn from this data and then deliver that potentially as whatever is employee communications or email, social media, etc. Well, as you have a bunch of people look at that and say, "This is fantastic. I'm enjoying that technology." Too bad we couldn't do it with stuff that's confidential to the company. Now you're talking about a company-wide solution because all you do really is build a firewall around the data and upload stuff that you know isn't going to be shared on the internet, that is within the company security system, and do exactly that same technology. But that's coming from a sort of bottom-up excitement about the technology. Or another easy one that would be a company-wide, relatively straightforward, I mean, easy, would be to create an employee Q&A system, a chatbot for employees, where instead of having to phone a number and get some dedicated rep who's probably outsourced by the company and has access to a database and taps in the questions, etc., that employee just asks the question in natural language to a bot. The bot goes away and looks at the employee relevant material that's been uploaded, whether it's websites or documents, whatever it is, that unique to the company, not the general internet. And probably in most cases, people sort of assume somewhere in 60 to 70% of queries are answered. And for the 30% that aren't answered, the human is now empowered because instead of getting a random, let's start at the very beginning and work our way from there, they're getting a formulated statement of the problem, why it is that it's not easy to answer, and in some template that they can. So they start with level 3 as opposed to level 1 and can act as a human. You can imagine the joy or the job satisfaction, first of all, to the person who's doing that now, instead of spending a lot of their time saying, oh, here's when we're going to be sending out for your 1099s or whatever the case may be, versus saying, okay, I'm now dealing with things that happen. So as people see technology and say, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could do this as a company? Those are the most powerful early applications.
So that brings up some other questions. That's amazing information. So if a company then is using one of the main models right now for their company and they can, and I think that there are paid versions, like you said, right? There's the basic version and there's the paid version. If you want to go deeper, we could talk about that in a second, what deeper looks like versus not the unpaid portion. But you talk about building a firewall around. Now, can you build a firewall then around ChatGPT for your organization, around the information that you want protected?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Yes, and so not just ChatGPT, and there's a number of sort of enterprise products out there that are intended to do exactly that. I think I heard Jamie Dimon the other day of JP Morgan Chase saying that they have a chatbot that has 300,000 employees using it. So that's a pretty big pot of data and a pretty big pot of users, probably on the larger end of the spectrum. But those employees are, and that's financial information, so it's as confidential and as sensitive as HR information. But it's within a protected universe. That could be a protected universe of one person. I have stuff that I run that I don't want to be going to ChatGPT. It could be, one, five, 10, and then solutions are available at the appropriate sizes. And it's not just about uploading data and asking questions. It's also about strategic planning and ways to think about the industry and your position, your corporate position within the industry, competitive position in the industry. And so again, if there are things that are going to be asked on a regular basis, you can set up repetitive queries. I want to scour the internet once a week, once a month, once a quarter, and look at the competitive landscape for what I'm trying to do in that space. I want an analysis of where things are going in terms of my competitors. I want to know any data that's available. I want to have information about their websites and whether they're attracting it. Whatever the question is, if it's repetitive, again, you can build in processes that make that. And this is custom to a company of no matter what size. So as you become more comfortable with this application, say, wow, wouldn't it be great if, as your colleague did, the wouldn't it be great if is often answerable. And I start, as you do, with the very beginning. What is the simplest version that proves the usability or the utility of this process? And then if I really find it's going to be valuable, boy, if I could do something custom, deeply customized, and then I start looking for the product out there that meets that requirement. So for employee reviews, I would start by asking the question, well, where is that basic data coming from? Is it accessible in some way to a ChatGPT type of bot? Is there a standard format that you'd like it presented in? Probably the answer is yes. Are there particular conclusions that you want highlighted? First draft, you can ask ChatGPT what are the most important things that are coming out of this employee review. Now, in the medical field, there's a parallel example, which is doctors are leaving the field because they spend so much time on the paperwork after they've talked to a patient, filling in the forms, etc., that there are now AI bots that sit alongside you. They listen, and then they provide the doctor in the format that's correct with a first draft of what the AI thinks that the doctor discussed with the patient and agreed with the patient, etc. So it's not going to finalize the answer, but it's going to give the doctor a huge leap forward. And I think that's similar for a lot of employee interactions. And again, both of those have to be in a context where privacy is paramount, and that's not difficult to achieve at all.
So let's talk about some of the note-taking software that's coming out right now that's got the AI backend, because I think that based on what you're saying around doctors, so many of us, regardless of what industry we work in, spend way too much time taking notes, right? So the note-taking software that's the most adaptable to any industry, right? Where, I mean, is there such a thing, right? I think somebody mentioned granola. And I haven't tried it yet, but there's a couple that I have tried that are very specific to, like, interviews, or they're very specific to meetings. I know I'm starting to use Teams now for creating transcriptions from meetings and whatnot.
So I think there's two parts to that, and Granola is a good example. The one part is, can AI intelligently summarize an interaction? And in this case, it's listening rather than you typing in, but it's listening to an interaction and then giving you back something. Well, if you much as if you put somebody who's a complete novice into the room with a pen and pad and said, "Give me a summary of this meeting," and they don't know anything about your industry and they don't know anything about the context and they don't know anything about the people that are participating, you're going to get one quality of summary, and on the other, if somebody comes in and then has background and has a structure and say, by the way, I'd like the report prepared in this format, so many pages, so many points, bullet points, conclusions, who's doing what, etc., you're going to get a much different output. So the idea is whether it's a predefined product or something that you make by giving instructions, and all of these bots allow you to give them instructions, you'll do much better by having it as specific as possible. So granola is a good example because many of us during COVID had this experience of writing notes while we try to participate in the Zoom call, but because we were trying to be active and engaged and present in the Zoom call, our notes weren't there. So Granola, you have a little notepad on the side, and while you're chatting, you just write a bullet point or a takeaway or a to-do, but it gives Granola now a context or a framework. And then when Granola goes back and does the AI summary, it makes sure that it's built around your notes. And to take that one step further, again, in Granola, which is a commercially available product, there's a free version, so you can experiment with this before you spend any money. And even when you spend money, it's relatively affordable, as opposed to saying, I'm buying something very specific for my industry. You can go in and create your own template. And you create one template for an interview, 2 people, one template for a presentation. I'm listening to somebody making a presentation on Zoom, and I'd like a summary afterwards. One presentation for a new hire meeting, one presentation for a redundancy meeting, whatever it is. And you create the template, and it will fit its summary into that framework. And so again, if you have something very specific, you start doing that. It's free or close to free, and you say, wow, this is great, we need to standardize this across the company. Then you start looking for an enterprise solution that allows that, because you've proven its worth as a sort of test case.
What do you think some of the most applicable AI-backed tools are right now, like, especially for HR and talent acquisition from what you've heard?
I've done a lot of homework. I'm in the process of preparing for my presentation on Transform, and there are such a plethora of tools out there that I am not an HR professional nor a talent acquisition professional. I understand the space, and as a senior manager, I've dealt with HR issues for a number of, of decades, in fact. So I'm familiar with the concept, but I'm not an expert, and I haven't therefore got I feel the authority to say this product is better than another. I think what I will do by the time that Transform comes around is put together some sort of list that I can share that lets people experiment, but I would be loath to say this product is better than that. What I would say is, in general, there are specific products that relate to the different stages of the HR process or the talent acquisition process, and within each of those specialties, there are, because it's a natural marriage, right? There are efficiencies to be gained and leverage to be gained in the HR or talent acquisition space by leveraging HR. So it's a natural place, and therefore a number of players have come up with products. And so if you think about the different places of onboarding, if you think about recruiting, if you think about maintaining a social media presence, if you think about foundational knowledge stuff that's going to be important, like the database, which you can ask, tell me about hiring practices, tell me about my leave, tell me about my this and that. There are many that fit into those categories. And as I say, I'm not opposed. Please don't take my conversations as saying I don't think these products have a role. I just think that they're more successful when they come from a need that's predefined, rather than a shiny shiny object that somehow attracts the appeal of a.
I wonder who is determining, though, those needs in our space, because again, you go to the conferences and there is HR software. In fact, I told my client yesterday, I said, I'll be going to this conference and I'll be keeping my eye out for the performance evaluation software that might be out there for HR, because usually I'm leaning towards talent acquisition software. But one of the things that came up for me last year when I attended a conference, I thought there's a lot of this overlap. And why are so many companies going after the same? Maybe they know that there's a problem. They know that we need a solution for sourcing or recruiting or applicant tracking systems to be smarter in terms of identifying the right candidates for positions they're posting. Um, and that's a whole different conversation in itself. But bottom line is, like, who's making the determination to keep creating more and more software around the same problem, instead of trying to, like, look at the landscape from a higher point of view to say, okay, so we've got plenty of solutions here. We can use our form models to determine really what, kind of like where we take off from there for some new software. But who's like really looking from the higher point of view to see what are the gaps?
Well, the wonders of a competitive market in which we operate, and I love that. I love the fact that you just put out your stake in the ground and you do something that someone else has done, and you say, I can do it better, or I can sell it better, or I can do it. I have no problem with that. But what I'm thinking about is the adoption. So who's making the decision on the corporate side to adopt a particular technology? Is it the chief of HR? Is it the chief of technology? Is it some partnership between them? And there, I think there's a problem, because if they decide what's best, they run the risk of what I was talking about, creating a technology hurdle or burden as opposed to a technology solution, because one top-down solution is unlikely to be something that makes everybody better at their job. So I think best practice in this case is for companies to create a sort of AI working group or AI ideas group or whatever you like to call it, and bring together people from the different aspects of the organization, different parts of it, and talk together about where they're seeing opportunities, where they think that something would leverage, and define for themselves what the ideal product would be, and then see if there's a product out there that matches that. Because it's like everything else, buying something with 100 functions and then ending up using 3 is probably not economically sensible. So if it's coming from an internal employee demand, it's much more likely to be sort of economically rational.
I love your idea for an AI working group and for companies who maybe don't have the manpower to create this group because it could, I mean, potentially people keep saying, oh, am I going to lose my job? No, there's going to be plenty of other jobs for you to go into. An AI working group could be a new job for somebody in talent acquisition
Well,
or HR, right? But my point is, if you have a lean team already and you just don't have the manpower to do this, I would imagine that there's gonna be some AI working groups for the calling it that now, but I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be other titles that'll come up around it, that people can bring in-house to help them to look at their tech stack and to ask all the right questions and determine what's gonna be most beneficial.
so, for many different challenges in work, we've used outside facilitators to come in and help a conversation. No outside facilitator should come in and tell you what the answer is, but somebody could help lead you through the possibilities and identify the strategic areas of benefit and identify the dangerous or the more complicated ones to perhaps stay away from in the initial phase. That's entirely viable. But I think every industry is tackling this or beginning to tackle this in some way. And so, for example, the construction industry, where you've got, let's be honest, the folk who are in the senior mid to late career are more likely to be heavily resistant to technology. And yet the opportunities for disruption in construction are enormous, and they could really benefit. So if you don't bring along some guy who's going to be the senior project manager on a building, you're unlikely to succeed. And so it's a tough challenge, but the only way to do it is to put him in a room with other people in that same space and say, what about this? And could this help? And what have you? So I think it's probably less so in the HR talent acquisition space, because I think people are more engaged, knowledge working professionals that are probably more open to this stuff, but there's still going to be hurdles to adoption. And one of the main hurdles to adoption is people. Their resistance to change. And so the best way to get over that hurdle is by getting them excited. And I think these sort of employee groups that get together once a week and start off with the AI enthusiasts, the champions, and then expand it. Bring in the skeptics and say, what's wrong with my thinking when I think we do well, if we could have a chatbot instead of a call center to answer employee questions? What's wrong with my thinking about these other applications?
It's funny you say that because I think in every situation, you're gonna have people who are more proactive towards learning the new technology versus people who are saying, "Well, what's wrong with what we're doing now?" I don't wanna for example, note taking. Last summer, we were trying some note taking software for talent acquisition, and a couple people on my team said, "It's taking me more time to go back and do copy and paste of some of the data that was transcribed from my conversation, and then to try to create my own document that makes it look like my voice to the hiring manager, than to just take my own notes and then ship them off. And yeah, maybe I didn't gather as much information as AI did, but at least I'm spending less time trying to extract the information from this note-taking software. So I mean, I got a lot of pushback, right? So that's the other piece of it. We're gonna get some pushback for people who do try it. So let's talk about that for a moment.
No, I think it's a great point. So when I lead workshops on AI adoption, for example, I go through an exercise of prompt engineering, and it's a very fancy way of saying, how do you talk to an AI? And I started off earlier by saying, it's not a Google. So we start off by this exercise. Start off by saying, okay, let's pick a topic that's relevant to the audience. In this case, let's say talent acquisition. Put a chat GPT, write me a blog post about talent acquisition, and you'll come out and you'll get some anodyne thing it is exactly what you asked for, right? So no, write me a blog post in the style of the following documents, which I'm going to upload, or in the style of a New York Times editorial or an Axios piece about talent acquisition. See how it changes. Now, write me a post about the top 2 or 3 themes in acquisition, backed up by data. What are the top current themes in talent acquisition? And slowly lead through this prompting exercise until you get something that's in your voice, that seems original, that is actually useful, that you'd be happy to use, to then customize by your own, adding your own changes, because you really shouldn't ever just post AI onto the internet. That's a sort of, I think that's a losing proposition in the long term, although it sounds convenient in the short term. But anyway, it gives you a robust 80% or 90% draft. And then you think, wow, now we've just taken an hour to come up with that blog post. I could have written it in 45 minutes, to your point, to the resistors. So great. But now we've also got a prompt, the final prompt that we can take in next time, just change, instead of the top 3 topics in talent acquisition, change the topic to what happened yesterday, whatever the thing is. And the rest about the voice and the training and the way you want it and the bullet points and the conclusions and all of the other work that you've done is now automatic. So your 80% draft arrives in 2 minutes. And I think that's the case. So if the notes are unsatisfactory the first time round, try giving the prompt what you want out of it more attention. Try. And then, yes, it is a big investment first time round, but, but it's investment that's going to pay back pretty quickly.
Wow. So tell me too what you think about the voice activated bots or chat bots or whatnot versus typing in the information that you're looking for.
In life, break it into 2 categories, and those that like to write and those that like to talk. And yeah, most of us can do a bit of both, but we have a preference. I am a terrible typist. I was not of that generation that was trained to type competently from day one, because computers weren't a feature until I got to business school. So I'm still a very slow 2-finger typist, and therefore for me to speak relative to me typing is a 4 times gain in productivity. So that's one thing, right? There's just the speed of talking when it's coming through a filter that is basically a transcription of what I'm saying, but it's taking out the ums and ahs. And if I say Tuesday, no Wednesday, it's doing that correction for me. So it's an improved version of what I'm saying out loud. But the next iteration of that, which I love, and people either love or hate, is if you pick up your phone, put on ChatGPT, and pop that little button in the bottom right corner that looks like little sound waves, you can engage in a conversation with ChatGPT. And I know several people who put in their earphones, go out on their daily walk, and for an hour, they talk to their phone about what they're thinking of today. What do I need to, first of all, remind me that I have to do this. So don't forget. Oh, by the way, I want to write a blog post. Let's work on a blog post that covers the following topics. So yeah, that sounds good. You use that as having an assistant who's with you on your walk for an hour. And you come back and it's all in writing on your computer, with the content, with the reminders, with all of those pieces. That I think is a highly effective way to use your walk.
Okay, so now will it then automatically, like if I'm using ChatGPT and I do that, say I need some reminders. In fact, I need some reminders later this afternoon in case I don't get this done or that done, whatnot. Where's it going to send me those reminders?
So it will know, because you'll say, send me a text, and it'll have your phone come, or send me an email. I have a daily email prepared by ChatGPT of topics that are of interest to me in the news overnight. I have a daily forecast of the weather, so I can see when I sit down at my computer early in the morning. So these are relatively recent introductions, and this is when people think about ChatGPT as just a chat. It's not really anymore. They're adding these different features all the time, and my concern for folk who are resistant somehow, who or just haven't taken the leap, it's too intimidating, or I'm too busy, or whatever it is, that every time the technology improves, you're one step further behind understanding what it is. So if you're already using ChatGPT and using it to draft emails and craft posts and whatever, you find out about things, write stuff, and then they introduce a feature like tasks, it's a natural extension to say, oh, now I can tell it to give me a shopping list of the following things, or remind me at 3 o'clock to call somebody. But if you're starting from scratch, it's sort of overwhelming, or can be overwhelming, how many things it can do. So I really, yeah, again, just experiment, experiment, experiment. This tasks is a relatively recent feature, and it's just making ChatGPT that much more friendly and engaging and usable. And then if you do it with voice as well, as I say, it's like having an assistant, PhD level assistant running behind you, standing by for instructions.
Okay, so let's talk about then AI for dummies. For those of us who are still like going, okay, fine, I'm going to acquiesce, I'm going to capitulate, whatever. I'm going to start using this. I'm going to go in and try something. So let's do a first time. I'm going to go in. So I'm going to type in Chat GPT, and I'm going to do what?
So when you type in ChatGPT, you're going to get a box that pops up, much like a search engine box, and you're going to put in whatever you think. If you really are doing it for the first time, or you've tried once before and it was unsatisfactory, I think about a conversation. So the first thing is not to just assume that there's one question that you could answer that's going to show you that it's fantastic. Think about how to improve something. So challenge it. Write. I want to write a letter to a friend. It doesn't have to be work related. I want to write a letter to a friend. I want to explain to them about what something that I'm feeling, etc. And I want to use it. I want a tone of friendly, casual, whatever, and then try to change it. Change it for fun. Say, give that back to me in rhyme, or change it seriously. That this doesn't sound like me. I'm a more personable, or I'm more formal, and play with that for 30 minutes. And just see, not to get the right answer, but just to see the power of the stuff. And then, as I say, write a song on Suno, or draw a picture. To draw me a picture of a doesn't matter. Your imagination can really run pretty wild. And those things are intended both to give you a sense of the power, but also to familiarize yourself with this interaction, the fact that it's a conversation. The mindset is really, as I say, it's not just a PhD student in your specialty, it's a PhD student in any specialty. So ask it. I'm reading, I love to read history books, and I frequently go back and ask ChatGPT to write me a background essay on something that's come up, a tangential issue that's raised in the book, and they're not covered in enough detail. Write me. I really wanted to know more about that aspect of something that I'm reading in the book. I'm trained as an economist. It's been a while since I practiced as an economist, so I love to go back and say, okay, give me a refresher on some aspect of economic theory. Just whatever it is that's in your daily life, that's a wouldn't it be nice if, and see see how it can do. That would be my first step, and then you can start thinking about, okay, at work today, I've got to write this piece, I've got to edit this, I've got to produce these reports, and maybe that I can experiment a little bit with.
When I first went in to use it the first time, somebody had recommended giving it 10 questions to ask me about myself. And so I did. And I answered the questions, and Chat GPT, and well, actually, it was Gemini at the time, asked me these questions, and I answered the questions. And it's like it gave the model an understanding of who I am, what I do for a living, what kind of questions I might ask it. And it's really funny because it'll save my questions too. So I can literally, there's like a library of questions I've asked it, and I can go back, and the library is like right there to see. So I can go and pick something that I've already asked it before, like you said, and there's already now that question in there. Plus, the more that I use it, the more it gets to know me. It knows my speaking style, because I like to use some brevity and lightness in some of the stuff that I write, because I do a lot of posts on LinkedIn. So I'll say, "Oh gosh, I'm on this topic and it's a little bit heady, and so give me a little brevity around this topic so I can incorporate that into a decent post." Yeah, and it will, and it'll give you 3 options. It doesn't give you just 1 option. So here's this one, and then it'll ask you, Do you want me to summarize this? Do you want me to do?" It's really amazing. Today, I received a 5-page resume from somebody. 5 pages, and I said, and a lot of it was very repetitive, and so I took the whole resume and I sent it over to ChatGPT, and I said, "Can you please summarize this for me?" ChatGPT used way too many bullets, and so I had to go back and say, "Hey, I need you to write part of this out in paragraph form," but it sent me back the most beautiful resume, and I sent it off to the client, and the client's like, "Perfect." Took me a couple minutes.
That's a great use. All of those uses are great that you're describing. And as you were talking, I was thinking when you asked me for the first time, okay, so somebody's taking the leap, they're nervous, they're uncertain, etc. What should they do? And what popped in my head as you were speaking was tell ChatGPT that. Say, hi, I'm a new user to ChatGPT. I'm a bit scared of technology or reluctant to use technology, and I really don't understand AI. What can you help me with? It's, you'll be probably pleasantly surprised at what ChatGPT offers, and then start your dialogue with some assistance. So a lot of people are using ChatGPT as a buddy, if you like. There's some Obviously there's some apps that are specific to therapy, behavioral therapy, because they've been programmed with that sort of background, and I think that there's utility to those for a number of people. Having a therapist or somebody in that or competency in that space available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is useful for some folk. But I'm just talking about in a general as an engagement. Hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm worried about that. How should I cope with this meeting? And I think you'll find also in those spaces that because you've got this incredible data set of content and wisdom from its training data, that it can often be very useful in those places as well. So my encouragement is just spend half an hour a day, discipline yourself to spend half an hour a day, do something obscure. For the first couple of weeks, it doesn't have to be productive at all. It can be completely random.
And another thing that I really like too in closing is the fact that you really can eliminate a lot of bias in the way you write. Position descriptions. I'm taking client position descriptions before I post them on LinkedIn, and I am running them through ChatGPT going, "Please rephrase this or reformat this position description and remove any bias." It's amazing. Bias that I didn't even notice. Very
That's
subtle
great.
stuff that
Yeah.
certain words, certain phrases, the whole must-have thing. I mean, it's amazing what ChatGPT has done to help me, and not only that, but the response rate of candidates has tripled, quadrupled over some of the position descriptions that were given to me by clients. And when I go ahead and have those reformatted and reworded by ChatGPT and I put them into a post or a job posting on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever you're doing it, it's amazing the difference in response rate.
Well, it's,
Yeah.
it's remarkable. So in my newsletter, every week I put out 3 or 4 applications. I always choose applications that either have a free tier where you can really get a certain amount of usage out of it, or they have some sort of format in which you can experiment for a period of time. And there's no need to spend a lot of money on this stuff.
Right.
There's no need
Right.
until you really find the one application that you love and is really important to you. And then even then, there's $20 a month for the pro version of ChatGPT. I just want to say, Denise, that you asked me to chat about what I'm going to chat about, and you are the prototypical example of what people should be doing with AI. It's so much fun.
Well, thank
And
you.
it's so much fun to hear you talk about all these different ways that you've experimented with it. I think people will learn more from you than from me,
Oh, well,
possibly.
thank you. I
So,
appreciate. Well, I think one of the things that you suggested is the AI working groups. That's huge. That's a huge takeaway on this. And I think that
oh, good.
companies need to be looking at that. And again, if you don't have the manpower or the workforce or whatever you want to call it to build a team internally, we need to start looking at, especially for people who are going to be looking to move their careers into different directions, looking at participating, creating AI working groups, becoming part of an AI working group, collaborating, talking to customers or clients or different business units, whatever the case may be. I think that's going to be a real big push forward. So, my gosh. So, Justin, how can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, very easy. I'm on LinkedIn, Justin Simpson. I'm Justin at Here.Now.AI.com. And the newsletter is www.herenowai.com. It's free, and I just encourage anybody who wants to learn a bit more about AI from a non-technical perspective to take a look. And I'm hopefully very happy to answer any questions. I hopefully meet a lot of people at Transform, but very happy to connect otherwise.
Oh, yeah, no, Transform would be great. I look forward to meeting you there because we'll both be there.
Yes, that'll be
Yeah,
great.
that would be terrific. Thank you so much, Justin. So appreciate this. This is great. Any final takeaways that you want to share with our audience?
Try AI. Don't be intimidated. It's fun.
It is.
And it will be useful. Everybody should experiment. It's fun. It's an enjoyable experimentation. It's an enjoyable learning process. There's nothing intimidating about it. I'd love to see these usage statistics reflect a balance amongst age, a balance amongst gender, a balance amongst every type of dimension. It's an easy and accessible technology, and it's enjoyable. The fact is, once you get into it, it's probably going to help you empower your career by making you more effective, by working out the places where it can add value, and empowering you to be skilled so that if you choose to do something else, you can talk about your AI competencies as a key part of your arsenal of skills. And it's not something that's going to make us, who are those with gray hair, redundant. It's something that's going to make us more powerful because we have the wisdom and the experience to couple with this new technology, which should make us the AI power users.
Oh my gosh, that in itself is huge right there. Wisdom and then the knowledge and the experience of using AI. Yeah, huge. Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of us who wanna keep working, so for a long time.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
let's get on board, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Justin. I so appreciate your time today. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Denise. It's been a great joy chatting to you.
Yeah, you too.